And as you know, that freedom to come and go is at the essence of Alpha. And again, we've had a number of criticisms for that. You know, you're pastorally insensitive. If somebody comes one night, they don't come the next, then you should go after them and find them. But what we have found is that the very freedom to come and go without being what they would regard as trapped is the very essence of why they come back. And a number of them said, well, we realized that actually you wouldn't call us, email us, ring us up, visit us, get us onto some database, even assuming that the church database is working and up and running, which is a huge assumption where I come from. But their anxiety is that once their name gets onto some list, they will be pestered. And we've always said, that you can come and we won't even contact you. And when they find that that's true, paradoxically, they come back. Because they wanted to come back. So that freedom has been built into it, in a sense. And it just began to grow. And the church in the UK, we began to get telephone calls. We hear you've got this course. What do you give them to eat? What time do you start? How many in a small group? So we started to run a conference, because Nikki said to me, would it be easier just to answer all these questions rather than our sweet telephonists trying to answer each of the calls? And at one point we had about 350, and then we did this conference. And every year we've done 2 conferences at Holy Trinity, just suggestions of how to run Alpha. It starts with the principles of Alpha that we've discovered, why we think now, looking back, it's working. I met a young man one night in our church, and I said to him, what are you doing? He said, I'm at the London School of Economics. And I said, how interesting, what are you studying? He said, well, I think what we're studying is to find out whether what works perfectly well in practice can be made to work in theory. And we started that exercise with Alpha, because we were interested. And people began to think about what is the theology of Alpha. And the theology of Alpha, of course, is not just the talks, although in some circles that would be what would be the only thing that was examined. The theology of Alpha is the setting of the talks, the community, the sense of belonging. And in the trade, of course, as you will know, it's called belonging before you believe. When I started, we managed to create the impression, I think, that we would love you if you are outside the church. We will love you when you can make the same noises as we do. But until then, you must understand that you're different, because you're outside the church and we're inside the church. But all that's changed, because we invite them into the community. It's like the early church's catechesis, I think, or like John Wesley's small groups. And it's just rediscovered, in a sense. We bring them into the community so they can belong before they believe. And what they find is a community that they love. And they begin to say, how can I join this community? How can I know that I'm a member? When you pray a prayer, you give your life to Christ, and you get baptized, and you form part of the Christian community. So that gives rise to, well, just finishing that train of thought, that grew and grew, and then we got international calls from America. We hear you've got this course, how many of you are on? Okay. So we traveled to America, again, just to teach people about how to run the course. The principles of Alpha, and then the practicalities of Alpha, the issues that we found, the mistakes that we made, just to help them. And I would encourage anybody who's either getting stuck on running Alpha or is proposing to run an Alpha course to get in touch with that material. And I think you can get it from alpha.org.au. I think all the talks are downloadable, and they're free, of course, because everything about Alpha is designed to be free. And anything that you have to pay for is simply money going into the translating now of these new materials. When we were in India, the only questions that arose at the end of the conference I was saying to were all about how quickly can you get this course into their language. If I answered once, how quickly can we get this course into Urdu? They didn't seem to hear the answer. I explained how quickly it was on its way, and then the next question, but one, how quickly can you get this into Urdu? How quickly can you get this into Tamil? All these other different languages, because they've got Indus languages, as you know. And Alpha is now running in 150 languages. It's translated into DVDs. Nikki speaks Mandarin, but actually many of them don't want it to be lip-synced anymore. They want subtitles, because they use it within their communities to learn English. So they learn English and they hear about Christ at the same time. And that's a double whammy. And it's now running in just over 160 countries. And that is simply something that God has decided to do. And not just in Kuching, we were in Kazakhstan, and there I discovered they were running Alpha. They'd never heard of Nicky Gumbel, they'd never heard of Heritage of Brompton. And as I sometimes say, they'd never heard of the copyright laws either. we only copyrighted it in order to protect the people who were running Alpha as Alpha from those surrounding churches who were running Alpha that was not Alpha by taking out some of the material that they didn't like perhaps the Evening on Healing or the Work of the Holy Spirit or something, calling it Alpha, and then giving a sort of inoculation to people who thought they'd done Alpha and didn't like it. So that was why we were persuaded to copyright it, because there's no copyright in the community kingdom activity. So our basic understanding is that if you're sympathetic to the DNA of Alpha, which is the work of the Holy Spirit, or the ministries of the Spirit, the gifts of the Spirit, and all of that stuff, the life of the Spirit, because we are Trinitarian, then any alteration that you make will be fine. But if you're basically unsympathetic to that, then any alteration that you make will kill the whole thing, and it will become an apologetics course, which it never was. It's not a course for apologetics, it's a course in community, Christian community life, and what it's based on and how it can be developed. So we started traveling, and Nicky and Annette and I, and Nicky and Pips and their family and our family, we traveled all over the world for about 10 or 12 years. And it was hugely rewarding and great fun. And just simply trying to answer questions wherever people had an interest in what was going on and how to do it and how to run it and things. So we never tried to sell it, and I'm not here to try and persuade you to do Alpha. I'm just trying to encourage us, because I think I know what St. Paul meant when he wrote to the Philippians, I thank God daily for our partnership in the gospel. And that's what I feel. We are partners. And if I can do anything to persuade you that you've got more partners than you thought worldwide, then my mission will be complete, because we get a great sense of understanding now that this is even more worldwide than we thought. It's running in India. They have just baptized their 100,000th convert from Alpha. That's what we know. It's only what we know. Much, much more going on there. My ancestor was a man called Alexander Duff, who was the first missionary that the Church of Scotland ever sent in 1837. He had huge difficulty, as I'm sure you've had with your church planting programs. He felt called to go to India as a missionary from Scotland. And he had a great deal of opposition. You know, why would you want to go to India? Are there no unconverted people in Glasgow? Why would you want to leave Scotland and all that? He said, I feel called. They finally sent him. He was shipwrecked. I don't know how the Lord works these things. But he was shipwrecked off the south coast of Africa. He lost everything he had. Didn't lose anybody, but he lost people. And 2 books were washed up onto the Descent Island as he was looking for wood to try and keep warm with them all because they were soaking wet. 2 books. One was his book of Scottish Psalms, and the other was his Bible. And the Lord said to him, 1837, May 1837, the Lord said to him, those are the only books you'll need for your theological college in India. And when we were doing a conference in Bombay, I stopped in the middle of one of the Alpha talks because the thought came to my head, and I just said, has anybody here, as a matter of interest, ever heard of Alexander Duff? And 6 hands went up. And I saw them afterwards, and they were, why I'm referring to it this morning, is that they were young men, as it happened, and they had the sort of thing that you see now, much more than we did when we started. With fire in their eyes, they are going to convert the whole of India. I don't know if they know how big India is. They're only Indian after all. Because they've got no hesitation about it. And they said, we could take you to his college tomorrow, they meant, because we were in Bombay and the college is near Calcutta. And I thought, that's not bad. And these men of God have been sowing into these lands for many, many, many years. John Hyde was 35 years. He prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed in India. And now I think the seeds that were sown are being reaped. And this is a wonderful reaping season. So that raises the issue, I suppose, and I've been asked to talk about transforming communities. I hope that helps a little bit, but Alpha, of course, is a means of transforming the community, but it requires us to give some attention to what sort of community we're asking these people to join. And I noticed that particularly in the UK. And I used to ask myself, because I think it's a useful question, every Sunday morning, I would say to myself, is this a church that I would like to go to if I wasn't paid? I'm not talking about how much I'm paid. I'm just saying it's quite an interesting question, because if it isn't, then why should they? And therefore, the transformation starts, I think, with looking around. When I was at theological college, I was very clear about the sort of church that I hoped that I would be part of. And it would be, I've got a sort of little mnemonic, or whatever the word is, acronym, GLOWS. My children think it's NAF. I think it's NAF, but it is. But I couldn't think of a better one. The church that we wanted to join, and they want to join, is G, a generous church. Not just with money, but a generosity of spirit. That speaks well of other denominations. That sees other denominations as team players, as part of God's team on earth. And delights in our friendship. And we've made more friends through Alpha with some of these other denominations than I ever dared to hope. Because I was brought up as a Presbyterian in the north of Scotland, some of you may know, we were very clear about God's plans for the Catholic Church. And I had to do what we always have to do if we've discovered that we're wrong, which is repent. And we've made such wonderful friends and such godly people. A young couple who were bankers in London, a French couple, and they could see instantly that they longed to transform France. They could see Alpha was a tool, but they realized that it was stupid to begin to think of the transformation of France without involving the Catholic Church. So every weekend they piled up the car, they had one baby at that stage, they drove to Paris under the tunnel, they spoke in different churches all around Paris, they just worked and worked and worked. And the culmination of that was the French Catholics adopted it, have adopted Alpha. And many Catholic communities worldwide look to France for orthodoxy, and not even the Vatican any longer, since Vatican II. And last October, Mark and Florence, Linda talks about being a woman and talking to the Catholic Church. Mark and Florence is the only married couple, and she the only woman that's ever addressed all the cardinals in the synod in Rome last October with the Pope. And they spoke about Alpha. And they have all agreed that it's working. They're very pragmatic, the Catholics. They look to see what works, and if it works, they'll go for it. And the fastest growing church that I'm aware of is Catholic Pentecostals in South America. And we did a conference in Colombia, and Ed and I were there quite recently. 2 archbishops, endless priests, ordered, they could do that in their denomination, ordered to attend in order to learn how to run Alpha. Why? Because they're longing to build the church.
That's right, yeah.
And what they see with such agony is young people not even considering joining the church, but they join some other Christian community. Well, that's fine. They'll get to heaven. But we won't get their money on the way. more seriously. UK, oh, it's true. It's true. They'll get, but meanwhile, we've got in the UK, we've got Anglican churches empty and empty and empty and empty. And it's so sad. When I went to Holy Trinity, I inherited a congregation, a lovely congregation of about 170 people, and they were all literally over the age of 70. And you're not allowed to say anything is dying, but that was dying. Because it was obvious, within 20 years there wouldn't be a church. And it's still obvious, unless something radical happens within the Church of England in the UK, there won't be a Church of England. There'll be these buildings, which are beautiful and very ancient. So it was clear to me that something had to happen. But my issue was I didn't know what. And I wrestled with the Lord again and again, because when I took over from the church in 1985, we had all that. We had, my encouragement is to try and encourage, my aim is to try and encourage any of you that look as though you think you're facing some insuperable task. Our liturgy was 1662, which was drafted in the 16th century, finalized in the early 17th century, and unchanged since. We had a robed choir, we had pews, we had robes, which I think most young people think are odd. I haven't come here to attack robes. But if you ask young people what they think of them, my children, they're not hostile, they just think it's weird. And if you reflect upon it, the church never had professional clergy for the first 350 years. And they never had a uniform for the first 300 years. So one by one, these issues arose and kept arising. I remember saying to, that's the title of that little book, which I didn't write, but a dear friend of mine who was on the staff collected one or two stories, one or two illustrations, and just before I left Holy Trinity, he kindly came to me with the whole manuscript written there. He said, I haven't the heart to take this to the publishers without telling you. And so that's why. And the title comes from an occasion when I was in California at a conference, and I was wrestling with the Lord because I couldn't see any way through this. And I began to offer the Lord one or two thoughts that I thought perhaps might be I can't even talk about it because it was so stupid. But I had been trained as a lawyer. I thought the Lord might be interested in that. Can't think why, I quite agree. But anyway, and he cut me short as I was going through these things, and he simply said, in a voice, I would only say I'd heard the Lord's voice about 3 times in my life. What he said was, all I want is you. And I thought, well, Lord, I think I can do that. And I think he says that to each of us. Because each of us has 1,000 reasons why he's chosen the wrong person. I think we each could think of somebody else who would do it better. Actually, the Bible's full of that, as you know. But if he's put his hand on you for some reason or some aspect and some involvement in this worldwide scheme that he's got of the re-evangelization of the world and the transformation of society, because the two go together. He's not just building up a church to feel good about itself. He's building up the church to do what he would do in the world if he was here. And he is here in his church. So all I want is you is what it became. And I kept coming back because, as you know, the Lord wants us to be a living sacrifice. He doesn't want us dead, he wants us living. And the trouble with living sacrifices is that they tend to hop off the table at regular intervals to go off and do something else that they're interested in. And then we find that doesn't work, so we have to get back onto the table again. Say, Lord, I'm so sorry. What is your agenda? And following the Lord's agenda, again, sounded to me